All right, by special request, a YouTuber asked about could I open up the Gamo Magnum for him and show him how to access the gas ram. So I said, yeah, I can do it, but I was a little busy, so now we have the time, we're going to do that. So the Gamo has Torx screws, and here's something, I don't know if you can get it available, but I find that it's pretty darn handy. It's a Gunmaster brand. Walmart used to sell these for like $7, and you get a whole array of bits. And I used to use these at work all the time. Matter of fact, I have 2 more over there in that box. But they're not really a lot of money, and they're really good for having around when you need some bits. So it's a Torx bit. I don't know what size. These do have sizes on them, but you know, eventually they can get put back into different holes, so you won't know what size it is. They're not stamped on the actual bit. So I'm going to get the camera set up, but basically you have a Torx screw on each side of the stock, right? Obviously. And then in here you have your, can you see that down in there? Your typical rear stock bolt. Can access it through that hole as well, and that's what you have. Now, the way Gamo puts their guns together, you'll see when you take your stock off, you're going to be careful. On each side there's 2 square metal tabs, one on each side, and they rest on a 2 metal posts. They can fall out. And then the cock and arm assembly itself, when you take the stock off, has a roller nut. You can barely see it, but it's right there where my finger is. And that could fall off too. Working on the Gamo as far as taking it apart is very easy. But you do have to be careful. You can't get carried away with your screws when you go to put it back. This particular stock's very lightweight. It's almost like a shell. But at the same time, it really feels good. This gun is just one of those weird guns that it's powerful, has a good barrel, and it feels really good to hold. And the lack of weight just makes this thing enjoyable. It's a little tricky to work on as much as it is easy. It's just kind of flimsy. We'll get into that. I'll redo the camera. We'll get it set up. Now, I'm not going to take the piston out because that's a whole nother ball game, taking the piston out. And from what I understand, the piston seals are hard to come off, and they may even be hard to come by. But we're just doing this for a basic breakdown for the YouTuber who wants to know how he can take it apart, put it back together again. He wants to put another gas ram in his rifle. Apparently the one he had, there's something up with it. I don't know what the story is. So let me get the camera set up and we'll get into this. Okay, let's do this. So it's also a good idea to take a gun apart. Just get yourself a container. Save yourself a headache. We're just removing the 2 front stock screws, and then we'll pull the rear stock bolt. And I almost hate to say this, but it's getting to a point where I'm going to start leaving my email address and making little notes. I'll leave my email address in the description of the written part of the video. If anybody out there would like to donate to my channel, that would be greatly appreciated, because it's a never-ending expense, believe me. Never-ending. And I'm retired now, so looks like they used blue Loctite. I don't know if you can see that on the bolts or not. I don't really want to set the channel up for Patreon stuff because there's really nothing special that I can offer other than what I do in the videos, because it is what it is. But I'm just telling you right now, this stuff gets to be expensive and it's never ending, and I can use some help. Now, I already previously checked the gun. It's unloaded, it's not cocked, we're all good there. So now you got the stock screws off. You got to be careful. We talked about that there were these metal slugs right where my finger is that are on the post hanging on the receiver, and there's a roller nut or a roller right here where my finger is, so you don't want to lose that. But I would greatly appreciate it. I mean, brake cleaner, paper towels, it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Okay, so there it is. That's what the bottom of the inside of the stock looks like. It's a very, almost nothing of a shell of a stock. Okay, so do you see the little notches where my finger is? Can you see that? That's where these two guys, the stock fits over these where my fingers are. Now they pop off rather easy. They just sit on a metal post that protrudes out like that, and they're shaped to fit the radius of the stock. See that? Let's get a little closer and look at that. One just popped off. So they're shaped to fit the radius of the stock. If you put it upside down and look at the radius of the receiver tube, when it's on wrong, it won't line up with the tube. It'll be off the tube. When it's on correct, it'll line up with the tube and there won't be a gap. It's just that simple. Even if you turn it the other way, it's the same thing. It will not line up with the receiver tube. So you keep it in the position where it holds its shape with the receiver tube like that. So there's one on each side. They just pop right off. And now you have two of them. Where's my tin at? Let's put it right there where they belong. Here's the other part, that little roller. See where my finger is? It just sits in there as well. So I'll take that off. Now, if you have a camera and you're not good with your memory, you could take a couple pictures of whatever. You'll have something to look at. And the other thing that you have to take apart, right, when you get to it, is this little safety arm. It's a little piece of metal, right? It's like a wire. It's easy to get off. Don't worry about it. There's nothing here that's rocket science. And I don't know if you can see down in here or not, but it just goes up into the little hole. So when you take yours off, take a picture of it. So you see how it's shaped going through and how it's shaped going through and which way it's facing in this part right here where my thumb is. Because believe me, by the time you go to put it back, you're going to be wondering, and you don't want to have to do that. Now, there's no other washers in this stock. I see it's just basically a plastic stock with the bolts that go through the holes and through the openings. It's not like the Hatson where there's those little metal cup washers. See that? That's what the Hatsons have. Well, this stock doesn't have that. So next you have right here the barrel assembly. At this point, don't even worry about the trigger. Just take a mental note of how this wire connects to the loop here, as well as in here where my finger is. The beauty about this gun is this all comes up and out of the way, and then the barrel pivot bolt right here. That's just holding in from friction. The stock keeps that in. So when you break this barrel open and pull up the linkage up in the air, the way my hand's going, you'll take the pressure and tension off of this. You can actually pull that pin if you want, help you get the rest of this off. So let's do that. Okay, I'm going to pull the rifle off to the side of the bench so I can break it open. See if we're in the picture there. And now this piece came off. Before we even go any further, the other thing about this gun is it's very light. Even the receiver and the parts are light. You'll see two notches right there. Can you see them notches? Those notches hold this piece in right here. This is the piece that rides on the receiver to keep this cocking arm from scratching the crap out of it and making noise. So how that works is, you see the end that's shaped slightly round like the receiver tube. That's the part that's going to ride on the tube like that. So this part here goes in like this, and it clips into the two notches on the rod that we were just looking at. I'll pull it out. See the two notches? I hope you can. So the U shape goes up towards the notch like that. The U shape goes up, and this slides back and it locks into the U, into the notches. And then when your barrel's back down, see, keeps it from making any noise and stuff like that. So that's all it is to it. Now this is very easy. You can just simply pull this up. The cocking arm wants to pop out right away, okay, but it can't really all together because it still has that wire attached to it. But at that point you're going to have the barrel broken open. So let me get it back to where the barrel's broken back. The whole cocking arm just folds out. It's really quite cool. You can't do that with the other guns. Pull this piece off and get rid of it before you break it. Right? Remember we just said the U shape goes up into the notches. So it looks like a big mess, but it's not. It's just kind of weird when you see something like this. So here I'm going to pull this barrel pin real easy just to get the barrel loose, so we'll have more to play with. Because what we want to do is get this wire off down here without bending it. So let me get my little punch. And it pops right out. See that? No hammer, no tapping, no nothing. We'll put that in the can as well. Now I'll slide the barrel out. Now we have a little bit more freedom to tilt this up. Are you watching? Tilt this up and slide this out. Let's get a little closer there. You may want to see that. Where are we here? I can't see. Too close? Hang on. I'm doing this off the cuff. So basically I have it like this. And you have to make sure it's all the way in and back in order for that to rotate where it's supposed to. So now I'm going to rotate this down and I'll get it off that wire. Your eyes are better than mine. You'll see that hole that's in there. There's a little teeny hole for that wire. Now let's, before we go any further, take a look at this barrel block. Okay, there's no pivot washer here per se. There's a good amount of oil which is needed. I can see the pin for the barrel jam. Don't touch it, leave it alone. This is not a Hatson. Now you guys have to remember, you know, you can't treat every gun like it's the same. Every gun's going to be unique to itself to a certain degree. So this is not steel barrel block. And I would say leave that spring jam alone. On the Hatson it was different. So now you can put this aside. Now what you want to do is get this guy off. You'll see, if you turn it around and look in there, the wire just goes through. Gosh, I hope you can see that. Wire just goes through the track. You just lift it up and out. See it? One end goes that way, the other end goes the opposite way. Kind of like a Z. This goes in the track. You got to slightly cock it put it through, and then lay it back down in the track when you want to put it back. Okay? It's not rocket science. It's not difficult. So we'll lay that down. Now at this point I'm going to put the barrel back, because now we want to get rid of the trigger. We want to pull this trigger assembly. And for that, what we're going to do, we're going to pull this pin here. You don't have to worry about the trigger assembly falling apart unless you do something brutal to it. But it all comes out in one piece. We'll set that up on our spring compressor over there. So we'll punch this pin out, and then we'll pull everything out, and we'll do it over there on our springboard, spring compressor. But for now, I want to put the barrel back. Now for putting the barrel back, I'm not going to stick the cocking arm back into the slot here, okay? See the cocking arm? There's the tits on the cocking arm. That goes through your receiver tube, just like this. There's your slot entrance. Can you see that? And it just tucks right up underneath and hits up into the piston. This other slot on the piston is for your trigger sear. There, now it's in, and now it's out. Very easy to work on. There is some gall in here from the this guy. So we're going to put this back, but we're not putting the cocking slot in because we don't need it in. It'll just be in our way. And it's very easy here, at least on this model, to put it right back. I'm going to put the pin back. It's no big deal. And now we can go over to our spring compressor. I'm going to close this up like that. I'll get the camera set up on our spring compressor, and then we'll talk more about it over there. All right, we have the Gamo Magnum in the spring compressor. And when we're done with this show and tell how to get in and out of the Gamo Magnum, we'll talk about the spring compressor, how to construct it. We'll make a quick show and tell of it for the YouTube user. Now it's crude and it works great. I specifically made mine this way because I can use this for any particular gun that I work on. But basically, in a nutshell, here's how it works. You protect the barrel down here with a piece of foam, right? Handbrake or whatever it is. Always put a piece of foam in there. Here's your stop, nice and firm. I have two wooden rods that the receiver tube goes through. It lays on this, but it goes through the two wooden planks. And then there's foam to protect the receiver. And I made the opening big enough to take pretty much any gun. Sometimes I'll stick a shim in here to switch, tilt it one way or the other, but I didn't make it where it would be tight. Now the gun's protected. And then I have the strap. It's for the whole thing so it doesn't jump up in the air or do something goofy. I just have a piece of rubber from a plumbing coupling, rubber plumbing coupling, and I just screw it in here. It's not rocket science. It's very crude and it works perfect. Anyway, we'll talk about that when we get done. For now, we're going to pull this trigger out, and like we said before, you'll be pulling this pin out. At this point, there's no tension or anything on this complete unit. It's just pull the pin and pull this out. Now, there will be the little sear that will catch to keep you from pulling this out, and it's right here. It's where the screwdriver is. All you do when you're ready to pull it out is lift it up like that in the air, so it will be off of the little catch that it's sitting on. So let's get the camera set up. You'll see me push this pin out. I'll start to pull this out to help loosen it, and we'll lift that sear up with the screwdriver, and then we'll slide the whole mechanism out. I'll get the camera reset up again. Talk about expense. This camera, I just replaced it because the other camera went and my regular camera went all at the same time. And I bought the camera, video camera used. It's a very good one, but even at that, it's expensive. Darn near $500. But the way it goes. I should have had this ready already. I'm looking for my Looking for my punch. And we'll use this one. Okay, so like we talked about, there's a pin here. They're really big. They're fat. Where's my other hammer at too? We're gonna see, this will move around. Now take note of this, because we're going to talk about this spring compressor, but this is what I will mean later on when we talk about it. This I should have cut here and have this whole area opened. I thought this was going to be our general slot area, but it actually turns out this is, I needed a little bit more off. So I'll talk about that later, but I'm going to cut this later, re-drill it, and put another mount here for the C-clamp. So I'm going to punch this pin out. Like, there's no tension. The pin just holds this in. It comes out really easy. It's a nice big fat pin too. And at this point, everything's ready to come out. You have that little sear that we were just talking about. That's going to have to come lift up. This guy can slide out. Let me pull this back out of the way so I don't hit my hand on it. This comes out a little bit, but right now the whole thing wants to come out. It's just right at this point, that sear. Pop that sear up in the air. You don't have to go crazy. Just pop it up. And now she's free. And that's it. So we can put this whole mechanism aside. You do something to this trigger, don't come knocking on my door, because I'm not going to give you any information for it. Leave well enough alone. Just for now, I'm going to put this over here next to this wonderful Pro Elite that I've been trying to get to, but just seems like I can't. Now this is just a shell, it's the ABS shell, right? It slips in there just like we saw it pull in and out. That's part of the design. It's no big deal. However, it has a lot of oil on it. I'm just going to wipe the bottom of this down. Alright, so now where are we? Well, now we're at the point where we want to pull this out, the pin. And here's where it gets a little tricky. So let me take this out so I can give you a better peek. It's not really tricky, it's very easy. I shouldn't say that and scare you half to death. This gun is about as easy to work on as playing tic-tac-toe. But you do have to be leery of how it works and the different parts, or else you're going to lose them. And you can't afford to lose any of these parts. So inside there, let me get my little flashlight. This is what it looks like. Let's see if you can even see that. Probably not. I can't tell, to be honest with you. So there's the pin that goes right across this part right here, and that's holding this ram in. So now we're going to pull that out. Now in order to do that, you need to make yourself a little tool to get in there. You can use a piece of 3/4 inch brass, a 3/4 inch brass nipple, or if you had a piece of 3/4 brass pipe, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't use a piece of copper. I would use a steel nipple. Whether it's brass is just easier to cut. Okay, if you had a 3/4 inch steel nipple, you can use that too. But brass, I'm an ex-plumber. It was available to me. And you make a tool that looks something like that. You see the prongs? So this goes through the pin like this. And then the prongs get you back to where you have to push the area. It'll hit the area that needs to be pushed back. Once it's pushed back, you'll have no more pressure on that pin, and you can pull the pin out. And that's what we're going to do right now. It'll simply fit in there like this. Now let's see if you're in the camera on that. Maybe we can get a little closer. No, it's too close because then I got to readjust the camera. Anyway, it's simple. Now I'm going to push this in with my spring compressor. And remember, when we're done, we're going to talk about that. So what do we have here? I have different wooden block adapters. And so you can see that. That'll go like that. There you go. Yeah, you can rig it up however you want to, but that's how I am choosing to do it. And then, since it's a gas ram, and the gas rams are hard to compress, I'm going to put a piece of steel in front of my block of wood, because I want that wood. I don't want to keep butchering it up. Every time the wood's going to try to give. Now we have the foam in front of the barrel that we talked about. Everything's getting pushed this way. The band is not super tight. Everything will still slip by it. I'm almost there anyway. And what we're going to do now is push. And push that gas ram that's here. Let's see where we are. We're not even where we need to be. Let's roll back a wee bit. Let's readjust the camera here. All right, how's that? We want to tighten up our C-clamp to push this gas ram and collapse it more, taking pressure off this pin. All right, there we go. We got it. So now we're going to pull the pin out. Now it's not just a round pin. The pin is actually, look, it's coming out by hand. See, took the pressure off. The pin is flat on one side. See that? It's round, and the flat is where that flat in there seats up against the flat that's here. It's not rocket science, real simple. Now the pin's out. We can undo the C-clamp and take the gas ram out. Now at this point, I'm going to advise you to, well, you know, I don't have another piston seal, and I almost hate to pull this piston out of here. What I'm doing is I'm undoing the tension from the gas ram. If you yank the piston out, you chance, did you get a good look at that? You chance cutting your piston seal. And I heard they were really on good. I've never been inside one of those, believe it or not. But I heard all about it. So at this point, your gas ram's sitting there. And let me get a piston real quick. All right, here we go. So here's another piston. It's for a Hatson, of course, right? You're in Hatson land here. Normally, on a lot of them, if you look down inside the piston, there will be a drilled divot for the gas ram's arm to rest in. In other words, that gas ram's arm has to pivot. It just can't lay inside the piston. It needs something to keep it centered. See that? But this particular piston doesn't have that. So whatever Gamo did for you to keep this stem centered, then you have to make sure when you put it all back that that stem is sitting in it, keeping it centered. Are you following me on that? Now this doesn't have one. I'm just showing you a piston in my hand to give you the idea that down in here should have been a drill divot or some type of drop-in divot, like a piece of steel with a divot on it, such as this. This is a good example. This is one I made for a gas ram, and the arm seats on it just like that. It keeps it steady and centered. You just can't drop the arm in like this. unless it's drilled down here. Whatever way the factory gave that to you, then you put it back and make sure that that's in there. Don't just slop this stuff back thinking it's done. If you don't know what you're doing and you don't do it right, you're going to be in for some trouble. I think I made that pretty clear. So at this point, I'm just going to pull this out. See what we have here. So, what is that? It's really cool. There's your cap. See that? So you have your cap that goes over your gas ram end. The gas ram, let's see if we get that thing out. Alright, I'll get it out. I need a pair of tweezers. Now, before I even say anything else, this is super sharp. You work with an air gun, you got to be very careful because you can slice your hand wide open. It's very sharp. The end of the receiver tube is sharp. Lots of things on an air gun is sharp. So there's your gas ram. This goes in just like this. Fits really nice too. And then when this is in and pushed back with your adapter and it's pushed up out of the way, you can put your pin back. See the flat spot on it? That flat spot goes in there just like this when it's all done. And there's your little adapter. Now since I'm here, I'm going to take a little 2 more minutes on this video. I'm going to undo this and take a peek. Well, if you don't mind my head being in the way, I'll leave this here. Let's just take a peek first. I want to see what's inside there. Well, they have something down in there. I just can't see it, so we're going to pull it out. Where are we at on the camera? And it's taking extra long, but you guys want to see all the ins and outs, so I'm trying to show all the ins and outs. But I don't want to pull the piston. Now this gun of mine does need some work, but I don't have time to go through it as close as we are. I only have time to do the show and tell. I have to put it back. Okay. Best as I can tell, they have the piston, bottom of the piston carved out so that this basically self-centers itself. So you can just stick it back in like this. All right, let me pull this back a little bit. Stick it back in the gun. And now she should be self-centered. Really easy. It's not like if it was a divot. If it was something like this, it would be a different story because you would have to make sure your rod's in that divot. And sometimes they just don't want to go in. This one has like a tapered end. It drops in. You can't miss it. So now when you lay this down horizontally, you want to hold this so it doesn't fall out of position. But don't hurt yourself. These ends are sharp right here. These 2 ends are sharp. Let me line this back up. And then let me put this guy where it belongs. We'll strap her down. So what I did was I held my finger in there. Put our little screw back. I don't know if it's in there. Can you see all this? All right. Done. All right, let's go see where we're at here on this camera. Let's zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so here's the end cap. We know that that has to go on so that the gas ram is inside of here all the way. This has to go up on it. So we'll put that in. And you'll see when you work on your gamo, they have everything nicely oiled. Would have been a good idea to do this first. Let's see if I can't tilt it back. Let me get my little screwdriver. Should have put the cap on while you had the receiver in your hand. Just be careful that tit right there. We'll get this gas ram up. She's almost there, but it's not worth. I should just take it out. It's not worth slicing your fingers over. All right, let me get a little piece of something to tap on that. I got a little piece of Delrin. Okay, she's on. Okay, so we know now at this point that the gas ram self-centers it on this particular model. Maybe they all do on all the models, but this particular model at the bottom has thing that so it drops and feeds itself towards the center. So we're good with that. We don't have to worry about it not being on that divot. We got our cap on. It's on the back of the ram. Now you have your bolt right here. There's your flat spot, and that's the part that's going to hit that cap when we put it back. So at that point we need that tool again. Voila, there's the brass tool. And the idea of the brass tool again is to push this cap flat area back while the side's clear for the pin to go through. All right, let's do it. I do highly recommend good piece of steel because the gas ram's hard to finally get it to start moving, and usually with the wood starts to give out. It starts to give because it's being squeezed. So the steel and all that helps. Now the thing about my particular spring, compressor, is mine is not made so that you can't do it. Stuff slides around on it, and I like it that way because I could stick shims in if I have a different gun or a different setup, and I can do whatever I need, even some height. If I need a little high, I can stick a shim under this and I get a little bit of variables is what I'm saying. So let's see, are you in the camera ready to go? We're going to screw this C-clamp back. It's all going to come forward, and when this is past that hole, we're going to stick this into the flat side is facing the black cap, and then we can be done with it. So we also have the barrel protected, and right now the strap is strapped down. At this point you want to keep an eye on this. Okay. Now the gamo has a good bit of power in there, so theirs is going to be harder to work with. So I'm going to keep an eye on all this. There, it's starting to move. I don't know if you heard that or saw that, but she's starting to come around. I'm looking here in the bottom to see when that is out of the way of my pin. So we'll take that light and take another look. Yep, we're all clear. There's your pin. Flat spot's going to go in towards the black of the cap. Might need a little tap. Yeah, I think I might have to do this here. Okay. Maybe I need to go in a little bit more. That should do it. My brass adapter's actually interfering. I can't see. Yep, it is. Alright, well, we'll use the taper punch. It's always good to have tapered punch. You need punches. So what we're going to do is try to get this punch in here and hope that it rotates the brass around. It's good. This is what you need to see, because these are the things that go on. So I don't know if that's clear, but I may be able to tap down this way. There we go. I saw it move. Should be okay now. So here you go with your pin. Okay, we're almost there. Just make sure your flat is flat and ready to go. Now she's in. And at this point you can back the compressor out. The pin's in, flat spot's where it needs to be. Back out your compressor. Now I don't know who you are. I don't know if you have a degree. I have no idea. So I'm trying to do this so that everybody can learn it and understand it. And there's your pin. Did a really nice job. So now she's back in there. Let's slip the trigger back. It's no big deal. This is just a shell that slips over there like that. See that? You could stick it in here like this. See that? Easy, easy peasy. Slide it in. Now going back, you don't have to worry about the sear. The sear is going to bounce up and then lay it back down when it's all back. And as far as the pinhole goes, just use a tapered punch again, just to make sure everything's lined up. See that? Pulls everything center. Now, a little trick I like to use is I got some weapon shield here. Really good stuff. And it always seems to weep on top of this bottle. So what I do is I just wipe my finger on the top of that bottle instead of when it looks like that, and I just wipe it all over that pin. Now, I talked about pins all the time. If they get a little edgy, you can get some fine sandpaper and smooth that off. Stick it in there. Just a quick tap should go right in. Should be no problems, because this receiver tube is keeping this where it belongs. It already goes to where it needs to go. It can't go in past the point. It lines up perfectly. Now, I do have hammers like this, but this does not weigh as much as this does. So this does the job a lot easier. You can use it when you got the pin in to maybe tap it back if you went in too far. So you want that pin to be on both sides even. And that's it. You're pretty much done. We'll take this out. We're going to put it back in the stock because you're going to need to see it because of those square big things and the roller and all that other good stuff. So let's go to another clip. Okay, so we didn't pull the piston, but basically the pistons look similar to these pistons here. Okay, these are different pistons from different guns. Gamo's pistons, I heard, were very thick. And the reason I didn't want to pull is because I'm not ready to work on it. I want to do a show and tell as we're doing it, but I don't want to get further into it, because then you have to, once this is all out, if you're going to pull that piston out of there with the piston seal attached, then once the gas ram's out, you're going to want to fine hone the receiver and smooth all the little openings and edges, because you don't want to screw up your piston seal, because I don't know how easy it is to get one, and it doesn't go on like a regular piston seal like this one does, or this one, or this one. Anyway, that's why we're not doing it. Piston comes out once the cock and arm's out, and it's already out when you worked on the gun. Once all this is out, the piston just slides out. Again, be careful you don't slice up your hands. All right, so at this point, we're going to get the gun back together again. We only have these little pieces here, if you remember. You had, just dropped it on the floor. We're going to have to get that in a minute. You have the little square pieces, and we talked about that the square pieces go on the metal post here, and they only go on one way, and once they are on, when they are on correctly, they'll line up with that receiver tube. You can see the gap down there. Well, it's not on proper. Doesn't go on this way either. That's what you're looking for. Not rocket science. So we're going to pull that off of there, get the camera set up, and then we're going to reconnect this rod. Remember the rod? Z-shaped rod there. And you should have taken a picture. Don't leave it to your memory. It's so much easier with our technology today to be able to take a picture of something, and then you can see how it's connected. It goes right down in there to that little grace part. You can't see the hole too well. You just have to know it's there. But you see the U-shaped slot. That's where the little bar, steel bar, lays in like this. Are you watching? The bar lays in here like this. And then it goes up into the hole. So you're going to have to tilt it. I'm going to put my glasses on. You're going to have to tilt it up in there to the hole and then lay it in the slot. I'm going to put my glasses on and get the camera set up. And of course the other end's going to go over here to that. So let me get this camera set up. I'll get the part that fell on the floor, and we'll get this all back together. Alright, I found the part that fell on the floor. So the first thing we want to do is I've got this up in the air, so maybe you can take a peek at it. You can do it however you want, but I would stick the rod into this. There's the channel that we were talking about. The rod lays in that channel. So there's a hole up in here. Get the rod through the hole. And then once it's through the hole, you can tilt it back and lay it into the channel. And you need to take your time with this, as simple as it is, because you want to make sure it's up in there all the way. Otherwise, when you go to lay this rod down, it doesn't want to lay down properly. I hope you can see that. If not, you'll have to understand mentally it's a simple hole, and the rod's got to go through that slot. So it has to go up all the way, and then you rotate it down, lay it in its slot right where my thumb is. And then you can turn around, make sure that doesn't pop out on you while you get this guy in. And that's going to look kind of like this. Now at this point, I'm going to lay this down here real quick. Try not to disturb it. I'm going to break the barrel open. Heck, you know what? I'll break the barrel open, and then I'm going to pull this pin out. Once this is all connected, we can put the barrel back with the pin. You remember when we did that? Let's see, where are we here? Here's my hand. We're all the way over there. What are we doing over there for? Let's get the camera adjusted. So I got the barrel broke. Now I'm going to pop this pin out just to give us some play. There's our pin. And my main concern at this point with this gun is to get this into the hole of the cocking arm, which is right where my thumb is. Once you get that, then you can start to fold it back. So here's your rod. Let's see where the hole, and you can do whatever you want with this. You can bend it, shape it, whatever you need to do. Look and see where your hole is and how your hole is in there, right there. Then you're going to have to go take like this. Make sure it's all the way in. Now we're connected. As long as it doesn't fall out of here, that's the only thing you got to be a little worried about. So at this point, let's straighten this arm up. Let me back up the camera. Let's straighten this arm up. Make sure this doesn't fall apart. Right? We're going to get it kind of close. We want the cocking arm in first. So just tilt. Get your cocking arm in there. Did you see that? I folded it in. Now the cocking arm's in the cocking slot. Now we're going to fold this back in. It goes in really easy. It's not a Hatson, believe me. Now again, you can take a taper punch. It makes life easier. It pulls everything together nice and center. Of course, it's easy to lose your center once you jostle it around. Now the pin's in, I can close the barrel. But before you do, just double check everything. Make sure you didn't lose anything. Right, you're checking both ends, including this end back here and that there. And then you can lean it over the table edge and close the barrel. And see how that's up in the air? Well, now you got this guy to put back. Remember this little shoe that they gave you? You'll see the top of that's beveled. That's the part that rides on the receiver tube. There's your two notches. Slide that up in there so that it's in between the notches and it can't slide anywhere back and forth. Close this, watch your fingers, don't get pinched. Push it back down. Okay, so now you're all back together that way. All right, now I would say at this point you're doing really good if you made it this far. Watch out for this pin. It's going to want to pull in and out. This barrel pivot pin, make sure it's even on both sides. Now you have at this point those two square blocks that only go on one way. If they're on wrong, I'll say it for the 5th time, they won't match up with the receiver tube. Because what you'll see is there will be a gap. Let's check for the gap. Nope, that's good. So it looks like these square blocks are tapered. One side's narrower than the other width-wise. So width-wise, from left to right here, from my thumb to my index finger, width-wise, one side's wider versus the other. The narrower side goes up towards the cocking arm linkage. Again, look down between the receiver tube and that. When it's on right, there's no gap. Okay, and that just leaves this guy, which fell on the floor earlier. Put that back on. Now at this point, the tricky part basically is not really that tricky. The whole gun's a little tricky, but it's very easy at the same time. Because these are going to want to fall off or they're going to want to turn. Because they're concave to the shape of the receiver tube, they're going to want to stay in the position, but they can get knocked out of position. So when you put the stock back on, hold on to these. Let's get the stock up here. This stock is not hard to put on by any stretch of the imagination. So I would say basically get this receiver up, turn it around, hold on to the steel lugs that are in my fingers. This guy fell off. Maybe you can put your pinky on that. See that? Fingers are holding the two square lugs, the pinky's holding that. And then you can just get your stock vertical up in the air like I'm doing. This might be crappy looking to see. And line up your trigger house over your stock. You can even do it vertical, really. That would be the better. I'm trying to get it on camera. And then stick it in there. And then it should line up with the notch area at the bottom. It's going to want to rotate if it ain't lined up. And take a look in there, you'll see. See? That's how they look when they're lined up right. And then your stock just lays back in there like that. It's not a Hatson. Totally different animal. So carefully make sure it doesn't fall back apart. You can put some Loctite on this after you know your gun's shooting fine and everything works. Blue Loctite, and that just goes through the hole down here. Alright, let's see, where are we in the camera? Let's get a little closer. Little blue Loctite. I keep forgetting it's a Torx screw. But don't put it on until after it's together and you've test fired it and this gun works the way it's supposed to. When that's done, then you can do your Loctite. The other thing I would suggest is not to overdo your screws because this is synthetic stock. It's thin. There's no metal cup washers between screws and bolts and all that, and it's just you and the bolt and the stock. So you don't go crazy on it. And you put your other screw on the forearm too, back together. I'm going to work on this later on. One of my YouTubers had mentioned to me way back somewhere along the line, he said, why would you want to take that gas ram out and put a spring in there? That gas ram is very powerful and it really does a job when you're trying to get rid of your rodents and stuff like that. And I told him that's because that's what I do. We like to see different variables and variations of what we can do with something. Anyway, that would be much down the road. I've got other projects I'm trying to work on that we're slowly catching up to. So I'm not tightening this up just enough to keep it in. That's it. We are going to go to another clip. We're going to talk about the spring compressor, how to build it real quick. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it. Let's go to another clip. Spring compressors. Handmade spring compressors, or I should say homemade. Very simple. The main thing you got to get, besides some lumber, is a large C clamp. Now there's many types out there. This is the type that I built. It's crude and I love it. It does wonders for everything I need to work on, and we'll talk about it. So we have a Harbor Freight here in the US. I don't know if you have one where you live in your country. The only thing I did on this that I will change later is I need to cut this back more because this is in the way of my pins. I thought this would be the open area, but as it turned out, the pins are a little bit further back. So I would cut this back here where my finger is and then put this bolt nut washer here. So it's a large C-clamp. Here's what a C-clamp looks like, right? Screw it in, goes in, screw it back out, it goes out. It's bolted through the wood. The washers here is to give it the height that it needs to line up with the height of this. Now, in a nutshell, it's a 2x6 all the way down for the longest part, all the way across, right? And then underneath of that 2x6, I have a couple little legs. One's here, just to give it some height. One's here. This goes all the way over this way. Give it some height. And there's a stabilizer leg this way so it doesn't want to rock and tilt away. So if I have to cut this shorter and drill it here and put this here, then this is going to be in the way. That just means I shift it. I can put a block here and a block over here just so this can't tilt. So how does that look so far? Simple 2x6 to the length, all the way back and forth. It's got a leg underneath it. It's got a leg underneath of it here, which is what I was talking about. It's just another piece of board going all the way across and all the way back. It's got a stabilizer here for the middle, which can get shifted. And then as far as the C-clamp, once you cut your large, cheap, inexpensive C-clamp from Harbor Freight, you can trim it and cut all this off, drill your holes. You can mount it on this board here. It's a 2x12, I guess. You can use whatever works for you. But if you go with the 1.5" 2x, then everything as far as height's going to be good. If you mismatch, say you did it on plywood and you did something different over here, now your heights are going to be all over the place. So you want to bolt this onto a 2x12 or something, and you use washers again to keep this up so you can get somewhere close to center when it's sitting up here. Now, so you have this all separate with a C-clamp on it. Just act like it's not there anymore, because that'll get screwed on later. See all the little screws? You just have a long board now with feet underneath of it, all the way underneath of it, and a stabilizer. Then you're going to have your end stop. Screw the heck out of it, because this has to be super solid. Just 2 is all you need. Later on, if you go to use one of these for different guns, you can stack 2x4s in front of this to get shorter if you need shorter. But right now, you're going to go to the end and you're going to screw the crap out of it. And that'll hold it in, and then you screw this. Of course, everything gets screwed in. Now you just have a couple 2x4 cross members here. See that? Lays across your 2x6. Now it's getting you up to the same height as this board's going to give you when you put this board on. Okay? And then this is simple 2 rails that I have here. All totally adjustable. I don't make it tight to a receiver tube. I leave it some space so I can use some foam, because the foam is what protects the receivers from getting messed up while it's in the compressor. And I like the idea that I can jostle stuff around. See that pack of shims over there? Well, when I want to shift stuff this way or that way to line up with this a little bit, depending upon what I'm working on, and I have my receiver in there with this foam, I can shift one side to give me what I need. Now, generally, when you stick your gun in here, you're going to have a piece of foam like that to protect your barrel end. Okay, and this is getting pretty beat up. And you also have this cheap little throw-over clamp. You should have seen that in the video we did just in front of this one. Little rubber boot from an ex-plumber, and this is just a rubber coupling. Took it, cut it, and wherever this goes over the receiver, put this there like that. Put a little screw in here to hold it down. It doesn't need to be fancy. You don't have to worry about that ugly looking wood with all the holes in it. Use the same hole over again. It works. It's no big deal. It just may not look pretty, but you know what? Something to be said for simple and crude. Anyway, now you have this up, your rails here. You're going to put your receiver in here. You're going to kind of see where this is falling in at. You want to get as close as you can to center. So now you have everything built, but this is not put on top. It's all bolted and everything's ready to go. But now you're going to put this on here. Then you're going to screw this down when you have a receiver or something in here to line you up with centers with this. And you can even extend this further out towards your work to get you closer to center. So if your receiver ends here, you can bring this in just to see where you're at, make a mark, whatever it takes, start screwing your board in, and then you should be good. So the changes I would make to this basically would be to cut this back, drill the hole over here, right? Use 2 bolts here and 1 over there. This can go further over. I think I used that because there's a little bit of something going on there, and I thought maybe it was more meat. I think it's a letter. And then I'll take this leg out because it's going to interfere with the bolt that's going through here, and I'll put legs here and legs here. This bolt will now be in the middle. Underneath the bolt is going to be nuts and washers, of course. See that? Nuts and washers. Really, really simple. Take another look inside here. See? 2x6 on the bottom, all the way across. Then you have a foot, right? Then you have your 2 cross members. Then you're going to stick this thing that you're going to prefab and get it all ready and lay it on top, get it in position. You'll have something like this, and you have your strap. Now for the ends, for your guns, depends on what gun you're working on. Usually for gas rams, you'll need something like a piece of metal, because the wood's going to want to tend to go and give when you're pushing up against a gas ram. So I always have a piece of metal, and I made up different blocks for different guns. You see that I've been working on over the years. This one here has 2 ears, and they're not perfect. See that? And then you would find out what you want. And usually when you're C-clamp, you'll have a little guy. I don't think he's with us anymore, but he kind of looks like this, right? I took that off because it just doesn't last anyway, and I made my own little adapter. I used a socket. Right now I got a nice flat face, right? I don't have this knob pushing. I have a nice flat face, and then I can work this depending upon how I want to do it with different setups. See what we have here. There you go. Right, or I can even put a piece of steel in front of that. Also, this steel that's notched is for safety. See, it would go up like that, and your safety will go up underneath of it. So you come up with your own ideas, basically, but it gets screwed together, and it's not perfect. I can tell you what I did with this was I threw this together. This board here is actually crooked. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it works and it does its job. It's plenty long. Now down the road you may get a different gun, and what you can do is you start stacking blocks up. This is already tied in. You can put some blocks back up in here and get closer. You follow me? And so it's a very versatile. It's big. It will keep your gun from getting messed up with the from scratches or whatever. And once this is cut back like we talked about, then I'll have extra room for punching pins out, but I've managed to make it work. I've just been too busy and I never got around to doing it. So I'll back up a little bit, and that's what it looks like. Real simple. All right, well, there it is in a nutshell. Now you know how to get in and out of your gamo. I'm going to say it one more time. Take some pictures along the way so you can see when you're done, or you're heading back to put it all back, what you forgot. It's a lot easier to look at a picture than it is trying to remember something as simple as it was. Thank you very much. And remember, if you have it, I appreciate it. You can take my email. I'm going to put it in the write-up and PayPal me something. I would really appreciate it. Like I said, it's not just paper towels and handbrake. Believe me, it's you name it. It just all adds up, and it's just costing me a lot. Take care, be safe, and thanks for hanging out.